Oh my god, I almost showed the title. Hello, I hope you're doing well. I'm really excited for today because today I get to work on one of my favorite things, which is building a lore journal for a book that I'm writing. If you don't know what a lore journal is, it's basically a tool that a lot of writers, specifically fantasy writers, use to keep track of things in their books. So they write down a bunch of lore into one place. Some people do this digitally. Some people call it a book Bible, a novel Bible, a lore Bible, book journal, lore journal, things like that. I'm going to be making a lore journal today for the book that I have been updating you guys on. Normally, I would put the title of the book right in the front of the journal, but because I haven't said the title yet, we're going to skip over that. And I have a sheet where I wrote down all of the stuff that normally goes in a lore journal, but a lore journal is really anything you want it to be, anything that pertains to your story, a character arc, a plot point, a map, whatever you need for your story to make sense. That's what you put in your lore journal, especially if it's going to be a series or if it's a really long book, so that as you're working through it, you can reference this journal and it's all in one place. You can see exactly what you wrote and exactly what context everything makes sense under. So I'm going to be explaining it to you, but just keep in mind that all of this is subjective. You can change anything, add anything, take away anything. Anything that applies to your book, you can put in your journal. It is all up to you. This is the journal that I'm going to be using for this project. It's like this really pretty royal cobalt blue color because if you remember, we started this book by spinning a wheel and making a character out of a bunch of random attributes, and then I challenged myself to build a book around her, and the book has this sort of ice blue theme to it. So I got a blue journal, and it is this hardcover journal. It has an elastic closure. You don't have to have anything fancy though. I like to get ones that sort of match the vibe of the book, but you can literally use a composition notebook, a spiral notebook. You can use a random journal from the dollar store. It does not have to be super crazy. And like I said, you can also do this digitally. You can do it in Google Docs, Word Docs. You can even do it in Google Sheets. I've heard of people doing it in Google Sheets or Excel or something like that. So it's all up to you. Let me show you my other one. This is the one for my other book, Oracle. This one is really extra, I'm not gonna lie. This one is from Peter Popper Press, I believe. It's the Tree of Life Gilded Journal. And it's so pretty and it fit the book so well. This book is about fairies. So I'm really excited about this one. I need to update this one though. But yeah, that's my other book that I have. But today we're going to be working on this book. I almost said the title of it. I can't say that yet. So this is the one that we have for this book. Obviously it's a lot more basic. I kind of want to paint like snowflakes or something on the cover, but that might be a different video. I don't have the time or energy to be painting today. So it's just a regular journal. This one is by Paper Age. I'll put the link to where I got it in the description of this video. And this one is the dotted grid journal because I think that it's easier to write with. I don't like having the harsh lines, but I don't want to have it blank and have it nothing there. So I'm going to get into explaining this sheet to you, and I will show you each step as I'm doing it. Before we get into it, I want to give you guys a good look at the sheet that I'm referencing for how to build the lore journal. You're gonna have to excuse my handwriting here because I was writing it kind of fast. I promise my handwriting is better in the actual journal, but take a picture of this, screenshot this if you want to. We have everything that I'm about to be explaining to you, and you will also see me flipping through the journal as well. So let's get into it. So the first thing that a lot of people use their lore journals for are character sheets. A lot of authors and writers will write down the name of their character. They might do a little sketch of their character, and they write who they are, what they do, their name, their age, sometimes their species. Whatever applies to your character, the character sheet is the place to put it. You don't need to have a character sheet for every single person who is mentioned in your book, but the ones that I suggest making a character sheet for are your main character / your protagonist, and I would make sure out of everything include the journey that they're going to go on in this book, whether it's self-discovery, if they're going on a physical journey, if they end up dead by the end of the book. Write that down on their character sheet so you know who they are and what they're doing and why they're the main character of your book. I also highly recommend having a character sheet for your antagonists. Especially make sure that you write down what their motives are and what arc they're going to go through as an antagonist. Did they start out evil? Did they turn evil? Are they going to be evil by the end of the book? Were they ever evil at all? Is it up to the viewer? Write stuff like that down on your antagonist's character sheet so that you know what type of villain you're dealing with and you can work to make them not such a flat, one-note character. Then I recommend making sheets for any side characters who have a purpose towards your plot, and especially make sure that you write down what that purpose is, because there's nothing more frustrating than getting introduced to a bunch of random characters and it seems like they're going to be important and then they end up doing nothing. So try to keep your side character cast to a minimum unless it benefits your book to have a really large cast, but make sure each person is playing a role. Make sure that they have a purpose that either benefits or moves your plot forward. The next thing that a lot of people put in their lore journals are land maps. A lot of fantasy books have maps in the front of them nowadays because a lot of people are working on world building. They're making their own cities, towns, planets. Whatever land you have in your book, it might be beneficial to create a map, and it doesn't have to be a super detailed map. You can just draw a rough sketch of it and then go and make a digital map later. That's what a lot of people do. The important thing about a map though is the map needs to serve a purpose. Like, yes, you can open a book and there's a pretty map and it has mountains and trees and rivers, but there's no point in including any of that if the map isn't showing you places that are crucial to the story. So on your map, where the story starts and where they're going, or where it ends, or where they journey to, or where they journey to and come back to where they started, make sure that those two places are on your map, because the whole purpose of a map is for the reader to get a sense of where they are in this world. The next thing that is very beneficial to have in your lore journal would be a list of settings, and a lot of people might not think about this at first, but the setting for each scene or chapter in your book is very important. So I recommend first writing just generally the setting for the beginning, middle, and end of the book. So if they start in your main character's hometown, and then by the middle they're in a police station, and then at the end they're in a different town, or they're on the news or something like that, write that down so you know where the story is going and you know where you're ending up. Another setting that is important to write down is the setting of any key scenes in your book. So if your character is discovering something, if your character has a battle with someone, write down where that discovery or where that battle is taking place. The next and probably the biggest and most important thing that people put in lore journals is the lore. You want to put just waves and waves of information, whatever you have, if it's a character's favorite food, if it's something that they like or dislike, if it's a plot point you want to come back to, if you want to set something up to progress throughout each book in the series, like they mention something in book 1, they kind of think about it in book 2, and then in book 3 it ends up to be this really important thing, write that down. The most important thing I would say to write is the who, what, when, where, why, and how the story takes place. If you can answer all of those, then you're going to have a story. If you can't answer why the story is happening, you're not going to have a story to tell. If you can't explain how things are happening, where they're happening, or what's happening, or who it's happening to, you're not going to have a story. The other biggest thing in background that people include in their lore journals is definitely context. Heaps and heaps of context. You want to have so much context for everything that you feel like you're doing too much. When you have context for things, it makes it easier to explain and you don't have to just come up with it while you're writing. There's nothing wrong with starting writing without planning, but if you want to have like a really expansive world, you should definitely write some context down. Even if it seems insignificant, just write it down and you can always come back to it later. Another thing that might be helpful for context and background is making family trees, especially if you're doing something with a monarchy or if there's a lineage that goes super far back and they reference this old ancestor. You need to know who that ancestor is and how they got there. Some people might make a family tree. Another thing that can get thrown into the background category is species stats. If you have characters in your story who aren't human, if they have special abilities, you can also include this on the character sheet too, but if you want to include like a history of the species, like so and so species is a hunting species and they have really good strength and endurance, you can include that in the lore so that when you're writing a character who is that species, you can make sure to point out how good their strength and endurance is. The last thing that I would recommend putting in your lore journal, you don't have to put this in the lore journal, but I definitely recommend writing this down somewhere. Some people make a separate document for it, and that would be a play-by-play. I am personally someone who can get lost writing really quickly. So I find that it's helpful for me to write down plot points. Sometimes I even take it as far as to write down what happens in each chapter of the book. You don't have to go that in depth if you don't want to, and you can just write it out and then go fix the chapters. I know a lot of people do that. It also might help you to write the shape of your story. I know a lot of us in school learned the sort of triangle shape where we have the beginning and then we go up and up and then we hit the climax at the top of the triangle and then we go down to our resolution. If your story is shaped like that, maybe write that out. If your story kind of has multiple high points and then a big climax, maybe write that out and write at each point what scene that is so that you can follow along as you're writing. So those are the things that I will be including in my lore journal, but there are really endless things that you can include. Like I said, it's all up to your preference, what you do want to include and what you don't. It's completely dependent on what book you're writing, what kind of book you're writing, what genre, if it's a series. All of these things can impact what's inside your lore journal, and you can make it as simple or as expansive as you want. A lot of people like to include little tactile things like pull-out pages and sticky notes. I know that some people will even make full renderings, like full paintings or drawings of their characters. If you're a visual person, you can put that in the journal as well, or you can have it stored near your journal so that you can reference it as you're writing. I hope that if you are someone who is struggling to get your story together, that this helped you. I hope you have great writing sessions. I hope that you have a productive day, and I hope that you are feeling well. Thank you so much for letting me talk to you, and remember that I love you, and I'll see you later. Bye bye!